I shot this in 6K OpenGate on the Lumix S1 II, and I could crop it like this for a YouTube video, like this for vertical, or like this if I want to be artsy and add some film grain to it. OpenGate just means you're recording using the entire sensor of the camera, which in most modern cameras is a 3:2 aspect ratio. And not all cameras can do this. So let's talk about why you would want this and what you can do with it. As I mentioned, it allows you to shoot for different aspect ratios and crop in post much more easily. This can be particularly advantageous with commercial content when you might be shooting for both vertical and horizontal at the same time, because all the different social platforms have different aspect ratios that work best for their ads. On my S1 II here, I have 2 frame guides, and one of the benefits of these Lumix cameras, you can actually add multiple frame guides at the same time. I've got this white one here, which is 2:1, which is the aspect ratio of most of my YouTube videos. And then I've got this blue one here, which is 9:16, which is the standard for vertical content on like YouTube Shorts or TikTok or Instagram Reels. Now, the benefit of how Lumix does frame guides, one, like I said, you can have multiple, I think you can have up to 3, and you can change the color and move them around and all that sort of stuff. But also when you add a vertical guide, it is not constrained by the horizontal one. So this means that while I'm not going to use the full height for the horizontal portion of this video, I still have that vertical portion usable and viewable on the monitor with the guide. Now, the graying out is also an option that you can turn on or off and actually adjust the opacity of that, I'm pretty sure. But this doesn't work the same on all different cameras, so it will change depending on what camera brand you have. But even if you don't have guides that work like this, as long as you're shooting in OpenGate, you'll still have the flexibility to do whatever you want with it in post. And when it comes to vertical content, a lot of people just shoot horizontally and then crop it, often with frame guides for a 9:16 image. And I'm not a big fan of that when shooting in 16 or 17:9. But in 3:2, it's a bit of a different story. Now, before I had cameras that could shoot OpenGate, I would just shoot things natively vertical if that's all it was going to be used for. And I sometimes still do. But rigging a camera vertical is not as easy as rigging a camera horizontally, because all of this stuff is designed with horizontal in mind. So if you can shoot OpenGate and crop, then it can just take out that whole having to rig your camera vertically to make good vertical content. It's not only just the cameras, but everything that is mounted on here with the monitors, the batteries, even the rods, everything is designed to be used horizontally, and there are way fewer products that are designed to be used vertically compared to horizontal. Now, you can of course still shoot vertically in OpenGate, and it would just give you more room left and right for reframing if you needed it. But if that compromises the functionality of your rig in some way, maybe you don't really need to. The extra height also allows more room for reframing in post, just as higher resolutions like 6K and 8K do. But specifically for OpenGate, if you are framing for a, let's say, 2:1 or 16:9 image, but shooting 3:2, you have the extra pixels above and below your 16:9 frame that you can use if necessary. Here's 2 examples why this is helpful. Let's say your subject is moving around a lot and they move up out of the frame. If you're shooting in 16:9, too bad, they're out of frame. But if you're shooting in OpenGate but framing for 16:9, then right now my head is out of this like middle portion of the frame. I've got my frame guides on there, but I can just move the whole frame up and it's fine. I'm still in frame. Same thing can be the case if maybe you get a boom in shot and you just need to move the frame down just a little bit. You can sort of frame out other things without having to zoom in. You can just move the whole frame up or down because you have those extra pixels above and below the frame. And if you're doing a really dynamic scene with a lot of movement, you could do this for the entire frame, or if you only need it for a second, you could keyframe that movement so it only actually moves when the subject gets out of frame, and then you can sort of reset it. And DaVinci Resolve actually has a built-in tool to sort of do this already, and that's the Smart Reframe tool. Now, you do need the studio version of Resolve to do this, and keyframing or using the Smart Reframe tool will allow you to keep it a bit smoother than just changing the framing at some point rather than cutting to what is essentially a different shot. You just sort of move the shot a little bit as if the tripod had tilted a little bit while you were shooting. Another scenario might be if you want to zoom into something that is near the top or bottom of the frame, you can just move the clip up or down to keep that roughly in the center, and you can just keyframe this as the zoom happens, or just if you're cutting to a zoomed version of that shot, then you can just adjust it for that clip. If you're bound by the frame itself, you'd probably have to zoom in quite a lot to keep this in the center. But if you have that extra room above or below the subject that you're zooming in on, you don't have to zoom quite as far. And you can just move the frame down as you zoom and it'll work quite smoothly. You could also use this to sort of fake some camera movement for the sake of movement rather than for reframing a particular subject. But if you want to add a little bit of fake tilt, you could do that because you have the extra height. And of course, we can't talk about OpenGate without mentioning Anamorphic. So if we take this 1.5 times Anamorphic lens and put it on the S1 II here in OpenGate, after the D-squeeze, it ends up looking like this, which is a 2.25 to 1 aspect ratio. And I could crop it like this for a 2.35 to 1, or like this for a 2 to 1 aspect ratio, neither of which take off too much of the image. But if I shoot in 16:9, we get a 2.66 to 1 aspect ratio, which is kind of cool, but it's a very uncommon aspect ratio, especially for final delivery. So then if we crop it back down to 2.35 to 1, we're cutting off so much of the edges. Not only are we losing resolution, but we're also losing some of the lens character. And if we crop to a 2 to 1 aspect ratio, we're gonna lose even more. So basically, if you're going to shoot anamorphic, it's generally much better to shoot on a taller aspect ratio if you're using a 1.5 times squeeze or higher. And OpenGate allows you to do that. If you are gonna shoot anamorphic on a camera that doesn't have OpenGate, you're probably best going with something like a 1.33 times anamorphic, like the Blazer, Mantis, or Apex lenses, because you then won't have to crop off quite as much from the sides. I made a whole video about the Lumix S1 II and how it works for anamorphic, so maybe go check that out if you're interested. And to link it all back to my first point, if you shoot a project for a particular horizontal aspect ratio, but then down the line the client wants to make a vertical video out of that footage, if you shoot in OpenGate in horizontal, then you have much more flexibility and you can do that a lot more easily with 3x2 footage than you can with 16:9 footage. And the same can be true the other way around. If all the deliverables are vertical, but then you want to use some of the footage for your reel or for a YouTube video, then all the footage is in OpenGate, so then you can crop it to whatever aspect ratio you want. So if you do have a camera that can shoot OpenGate, but for some reason you haven't used it, maybe consider it. And if you're in the market for a camera and you think OpenGate might be a feature that would be very helpful for you, consider that when choosing what camera to buy. And if you're not in the market for a camera and just watch this video for entertainment purposes, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. But that'll be all for this one. Do all the other things before you leave. Maybe go check out my S1 II anamorphic video, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.